Good afternoon and welcome to Tree Talk episode 208. Another bumper episode ahead. We are obviously looking back on the 4 county finals we had last weekend. We have 3 more to come this weekend. We have 2 special guests, as you can see on the screen there, Liam O'Brien and Niall Deegan. Obviously Matt O'Callaghan as always. So stay tuned for a busy episode of Tree Talk.
The impression again we get out with what you put into it. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well, Trot, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea. He deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word go today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
As I said prior to the intro there, we're joined by Liam O'Brien and Niall Deegan to discuss their book, Illustrated Tales from the Limerick Terraces. I suppose it's the newest book that's going to be there for all Limerick fans with this renowned success we've had over the last few years. And I suppose co-authors was kind of a way I'm using to describe ye lads, but I think it was your idea originally, Niall, or it was an idea from both of you. But Niall, just could you give us an idea of where the book came from before we get into the nitty-gritty of it?
Yeah, of course. I'd say it was April 2020. Just happened to be on Facebook one night when I saw Liam's supporters page. Decided to join it. Loved to read the stories and the pictures that people were posting. And it came to me when I said, what about the people that aren't on social media? How are they going to see these pictures? How are they going to read these stories? So I have a small bit of graphic design skills that I learned in college, and I decided to create a book. Spent a couple of nights at home just creating a cover, and the original book was called Tales from the Terraces. Work commitments, next 2 years that flew by, didn't look at it, and I came back to it in April of this year, 2022. I kind of looked at it, who's going to help me with this book? And again, I thought of Liam. Sent him a little message, and within 20 seconds he'd come back to me and say, will you take a call? I spent only 2 hours that night on the phone, Liam did it, thinking about the book and hurling and so on, and straight away I kind of knew after speaking to Liam that this would be published. He kind of said, let's change the name, Tales from the Limerick Terraces. He picked Charlie Milford, which was amazing. Contact John Cregan about using the crest on the book, and to kind of narrow down just one day, which originally was the 2018 final. So I spent the next couple of weeks kind of creating a template for the book, and a couple of weeks after that I got COVID and I missed out on the final. And I suppose I spoke to Liam a couple of weeks afterwards to say, could we go to 2022 for the reason that I'd missed the final. I'd like to see the fans' pictures, read their stories. It's fresh in their minds. But the weather was amazing, and I knew the photographs were going to be outstanding.
And your part there in that, Liam, was it straight away you knew this was something that you wanted to get on board with?
Oh, 100%. When Niall got in touch with me back earlier on in the year, saying he this idea about doing a book of like the social history about people going to games. Like, I mean, we're all very aware of these fantastic books that focus on the games and the players, but there's a huge story there in terms of the social history of games, and it's something we all grew up with. It's part and parcel of what the J is about. How people go to the games, and sometimes the stories of how people go to the games or who they met sometimes even supersede the games themselves. You know, many of the greatest stories I've heard from my father and my uncles and stuff from way back in the 50s and 60s is about, you know, the famous Munster Final 61 and the big crush in the Gaelic grounds, rather than the match itself. Actually, I think that match itself was probably poor enough. But so I thought that was a fantastic idea by Niall to kind of flip the camera around and put the supporters in the spotlight and their story of the day. And the greatest thing about, I suppose, social media, I know it gets a bad rap. Believe me, you know, I was never a huge fan of it myself. And that was kind of, we were all determined when we started the page off that it would be always positive and always welcoming for people of all ages. And Niall's book reflects that so well, from people who went from Limerick, the traditional ways, by car, by train, people who travelled from other parts of the world, as we'll see in a while, and one or two people like Niall who unfortunately couldn't make the final for various reasons as well, you know. So it's kind of like a family album of Limerick supporters, basically, in and around the day of the All-Ireland final last July. Yeah,
it's certainly very memorable times for Limerick. I suppose, anyone for you, Niall, that stood out? Any, like we know the names as a couple will run through here, the likes of Hammy Dawson and Bob Carlin, but anyone stand out to you that's a very interesting story that you wouldn't have got, I suppose, the way Liam is saying, if you just went to the mainstream and just saw the report from the game about the players?
I think Mairead Quirks is one. It's kind of relevant to my own. Mairead is living in London. She's originally from Croom. She wasn't allowed to travel because of an operation she had because on her leg. So that kind of stood out to me.
And for you, Liam, was there anyone in particular that kind of stood out to you as, you know?
I suppose there's a few certainly off the top of my head. I mean, I think the Wesley Morrissey from Patrick's Well, originally from Patrick's Well, living in Dubai. I think we have a photo of him there. He sent us a wonderful story of his journey coming from Dubai to be at Croke Park that day, and as you can see by the photo he sent us, meeting these three fellow parishioners, Aaron, Kean and David Burns, recently crowned Hurler of the Year. And it's a wonderful story to see somebody going to such lengths to come home and support their team. Now, I think the Limerick, in the fullness of time, Limerick's journey in GAA lore and story will be remembered more than any other for the last 4 or 5 years, because we were the only county in either code to have a COVID All-Ireland, nobody there, a half-filled stadium last year, and this year in blazing colour, 83,000 people, blue skies, and it was just an unbelievable atmosphere. And I mean, the joy from the photos in the book leaps out of the pages at you, and the colours. And as I say, that's Niall's forte, is really working with the images and getting those images to work right as well, you know. So that was probably the most memorable one for me. But there's lots of others too now.
Yeah, I'm sure people have to go in and buy it to see all of them. But I suppose it's for a good cause as well. I suppose it's really important that the proceeds will go to Milford Hospice. And you might just explain how people can purchase the book, or where they can get it, or what's the plan in that regard, because I know it's available for pre-order at the moment, but one you might want to tell us there. I'll throw to you, Niall.
Sorry. Pre-orders are through the Limerick book at gmail.com. We're taking orders either by PayPal or Revolut at the moment. And again, as I said earlier, we hope to start shipping in the next 2 weeks. So Liam doesn't know this, but I literally just received a copy of the book an hour ago from the printer. I'll share it with you later, Liam.
Yeah, I suppose that's the beauty of doing these things kind of live. But the Milford Hospital aspect of it, I suppose, whose idea was that? Because we know we've seen the Limerick senior hurling and under 20 team with Milford Hospital in recent years, and you know, it's a really worthy cause, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get across there, Liam.
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose when me and I were discussing about the proceeds of the book, I mean, we wanted it to go to a good cause. And I suppose the Limerick Hurlers led the way a couple of years ago with the hit to Oola and the whole association with Limerick GAA and Milford Hospice. And I mean, I don't need to kind of overstate the important role that Milford and the wonderful staff out there play, not only in Limerick but in the whole of the Midwest, and the wonderful work they do for people when they need it the most. And I've seen that firsthand as well, and I'm sure, as I say, many of our listeners will have seen it as well. So I think it was a bit of a no-brainer, I suppose, really. And the fact, I suppose, that the book contains over 500 supporters, Niall, is it?
150 is there almost, yeah.
Yeah, 550
supporters. And 192 images, yeah.
So it's essentially a book for Limerick supporters by Limerick supporters, and the proceeds of it will go to support one of Limerick's greatest organisations, charitable organisations as well. So I think it was a bit of a no-brainer to do that, really, you know. And we dedicate the book as well to the staff of Milford Hospice.
Yeah, I suppose it's Milford Hospice have done so much work in recent years. I suppose the likes of COVID and them kind of highlighted more than ever. Matt, it looks like you were wanting to get something in there, or.
Yeah, first of all, Jack, I would like to congratulate the lads, and it's an absolutely wonderful concept. And like, you know, Liam touched on it there when he spoke about, you know, there's reams have been written about great matches, all sorts of matches, and you know, great players and all that sort of a thing. And you know, as someone that was raised on a diet of people cycling to Thurles, and in one case a pony and trap to Limerick, you know, for matches, you know, one of the most important stakeholders in our great organisation is our supporters. And it is very welcome, you know, that we would shine a light on our supporters, shine a light on the great rounds that an awful lot of them go to get to see the games, like the piece there on Wesley Morrissey. I haven't seen the book, obviously, but you know, I'm you know, full of awe and full of admiration for the whole concept. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and like the concept to put a book like that together, it's novel, it's innovative, it's new, and the fact that it is that the proceeds are going to go to a worthy cause like Milford Care Centre. I think this is a project, Jack, that ticks all the boxes, and I'd say to you again, lads, well done, lads.
Yeah, it certainly ticks all the boxes in that regard, and I suppose it's a good time to be a Limerick GAA fan. It's a good time to have a book like this with you know, All-Ireland finals now. Unfortunately, we've only been able to go to 3 out of the 4, and obviously now you missed another one as well. But you know, there's some star players there that will stand the test of time. And I know myself around Christmas time, as we're approaching, it's a bit early to say the C word yet, but we are approaching that. It's a real good time to, you know, look back at all these players, and will for many years. But this current crew, and I know you're both obviously very keen Limerick fans, and we did have the All-Stars the other night, and we all know how Matt's opinion on the All-Stars, and we should be going for 15 Limerick fellas every year nearly. But I suppose, while we are on the subject of Limerick hurling and we had the All-Stars, Liam, what was your, I suppose, immediate thoughts after the All-Stars?
I suppose it's probably an argument we have almost every year as to what exactly what's the critique, what's the actual rules for picking the All-Stars, because it seems to be a moving target as to how they can move players around some years and rigidly fix players to a position another year as it suits. I don't know. I mean, 7 All-Stars, it's not bad. Certainly, I suppose we only got 6 in 2018, did we? Yeah, 6 in 2018. Yeah. But if you consider particularly, I think, a couple of things that I suppose that people didn't count on, I don't think. I mean, we played most of the season bar one game and a bit without a generational hurler in Cian Lynch, and I think the work that the likes of Will O'Donoghue, for example, had to do to compensate, like, when you go to a game, it's only when you see the likes of Cian Lynch in action. I know he does all the magnificent first touch and his tricks and all that, but it's the space he creates around him and draws fellas in. That was missing for most of Limerick's games. So all the players around that quadrant in the middle of the field, that vital area, had to work so much harder, maybe even sometimes just to break even in games. And like Will O'Donoghue in particular, I feel sorry for him that he probably was overlooked. Even the likes of Tom Morrissey, to be honest, I think these lads work really hard, a lot of thankless work. And of course, I suppose, look, Sean Finn is the one that everyone's talking about as well. I suppose we could go on and on and on about debating it. It's just funny that the way that the criteria that's required to get an All-Star seems to be a moving target over the years. And I'm going to go way back now, and Matt will remember this. In 1973, Eamon Cregan scored something like 3 goals and 11 points in the Munster Championship. And for the All-Ireland final, they moved him back to centre-back. And he played an almost man of the match, a pivotal role in Limerick winning it, snuffed out Pat Delaney. Cregan got no All-Star at all. Yes, Eddie Kerr, who didn't even play in the All-Ireland final, now granted he probably had a great Leinster final, got an All-Star. That makes no sense to me. But again, that's just the way I think about it. What do you think, Matt?
I agree with you, Liam. I'm perplexed by how they come to their conclusions. Jack is smirking at me now because he knows full well, how I feel about it. And I agree totally with Will Donoghue. Now, last week, Jack and I, we were trying to second guess these august body of gentlemen, and we did come up with the 2 midfielders, but they're not that was not necessarily the 2 midfielders that we would select.
Yeah.
But we were second guessing what they were doing, and I think Will O'Donoghue was desperate, unlucky. Now, of course, I'm really pleased that they didn't make the mother of all gaffes in the goalkeeping position that that Nicky Quaid has got it, and rightly so. But the gaff has moved from number 1 to number 2, not far. Because I think what I would say shame that Sean Finn didn't get an All-Star. Without doubt, the best, most consistent cornerback in the country in 2022. Not a doubt enough about it. I don't think there's anybody could bring up a vestige of a cogent argument to say that there was anybody better than him. Likewise, you move out along. We thought, because of the vagaries and how they go about it, as you explained there, Liam, I thought that Declan Hannon wouldn't get one, because I thought they'd be on accommodating this one and that one and the other one in the half-back line, but thankfully he got it. Your point about Tom Morrissey is valid. Seamus Flanagan, and the Munster final of 2022 was eulogised at the All-Stars till the cows come home. Seamus Flanagan got 8 points from playing that game, and he didn't even get a mention.
Yeah.
We won 2 in a row, we got 12 All-Stars. We win 3 in a row, and we get 7. I remember the day, and you probably remember that game. I don't know if you do or not. But where the nominations consisted of nominations for goalkeeper, nominations for right fullback, and left fullback. And the successful All-Star came out of that group. But now they have open license. It's open season. Yeah. We will name the defenders. Look, how Sean Finn isn't an All-Star for the 5th time. I don't want to be annoying myself, to be honest.
Yeah, you would think about too much. I think Sean Finn and Will O'Donoghue are definitely the most aggrieved. That's where I was laughing, was that I remember Richie McCarthy won one in 13. It was the first All-Star we had in 6 years. We had 1. We were delighted, and now we're giving out about having 7, that we should have more. But Niall, I'll throw it to you there, your thoughts on the All-Stars, and I suppose you've been good enough to give us your time there for the last 20 minutes or so. So maybe your thoughts on the All-Stars and just a final, I suppose, not plea for people to get the book, but a final word on the book before I let you go.
Similar to Matt, I think number 1 and 2. If Nicky Quaid didn't get one, I thought Sean Finn would have, but it happened to be the other way around. Sean Finn, he was robbed. But everyone is talking about Tony Kelly. He's in a different position every year, similar to what Liam just said. Look, it was kind of, we had no All-Stars, I think 7, and a Player of the Year. I was happy enough with it. I would like to have 1 or 2 maybe, but Let's go for 4. We get more next year, hopefully. I know I'm pushing it out, but I suppose going back to the book, just a few people I'd like to thank, if you don't mind, Jack.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank John Cregan, Paul Foley, for allowing us to use, and the county board, of course, for allowing us to use the crest on the book. All the contributors to the book. Naturally, we'd have no book without them. But James London, you have to get a mention somewhere, Liam.
Of course.
He helped us out. Kieran Crowe, Joe Lyons, Green and White, our printer, Mike Hampton, and I suppose Mike McGuire from Limerick Libraries, who's going to start the book as soon as we go to print.
Yeah, and just to follow up, I suppose, what we're hoping for with the book, and it's going to be in the library as well, the library going to take 10 or 15 copies off us. We're hoping that in 30, 40, 50 years' time, somebody can walk in and say, wow, that's my mother, that's my dad. Look at them when they were kids going through again. So there's the social history there.
Yeah,
it's a timeless book, and thank God it's coming at a time where Limerick are so successful. But a huge thank you to you lads for not only coming on today, but providing a book like that. Matt spoke very well there about it. You can get it at limerickbook@gmail.com. That's where you email and let the lads know how many copies you want. And as you said, Niall, hopefully in the next couple of weeks you'll be going to print and people have them in time to sit around the fire at Christmas time and recap this year, 6 months out. But as you said, down the years, you can look back on a very unique All-Ireland win and a 3 in a row for Limerick. And hopefully it'll be the middle of a 6 or 7 in a row. But for now, anyway, it's a nice bookend at 3 in a row. But a huge thank you to Liam and to Niall for coming on for talking. And I'm sure we'll have you back on sooner, close time when the book is out, and maybe we'll go through it ourselves. We'll have a physical copy. But a huge thank you to you, lads, and we will be in touch soon.
Thanks, lads. Good luck.
Thank
you.
Cheers.
Bye.
And so, Matt, back to me and you. It was good to talk to the lads there and get an idea, because
the concept is absolutely fantastic, because, in bad times, the Limerick supporters have been absolutely fantastic. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
They what they suffered in terms of disappointments, near misses, and dashing of hopes for 45 years before 2018 was simply phenomenal. But they kept coming, they kept supporting their team, and for them, for the Limerick supporters, it's absolutely fantastic that they are enjoying this wonderful, wonderful odyssey. And fair play to the lads to hone in on those people and shine a light on them. And absolutely fantastic concept.
Yeah, definitely. And I know myself, I love a physical copy of a book or something like that, especially when it has pictures. It makes it a lot easier to read. So to have so many pictures and so many tales from people. And look, we've been there as well. I know when we did our top 10 moments, one of mine was just listening to the Cranberries play out in Croke Park. And, you never see that in an article. You have to be there and experience it, and to see other people, say they felt the same thing or things like that. It's really special. So a huge well done to the lads for providing a book like that. It'll be if you missed that, it'll be on our website where to get it. But I'd say get them sooner rather than later, because I don't know is there a limited number or not. But I'm sure the lads will provide for every once. 23 minutes in, Matt, and we're only getting started on a very busy weekend ahead, and we'll look back on the weekend we had soon enough. But so the big one is this Sunday afternoon in Kilmallock, 2:45, Newcastle West versus Adair. A repeat of last year's Limerick Senior Football Championship final. If you were to pick, the finalists at the start of the year, you probably would have said these teams, pretty much like the Piarsaigh, Kilmallock and the hurling, they have been the two standout teams in recent years. Newcastle are the champions, and they've been very good this year, I think it's fair to say. But Adair have kind of come in under the radar, and we'll start with them, Matt, because obviously we're lackluster in last year's final. There's no two ways about it. It was a poor game, missing Hugh Burke for the entire season, inter-county player, but also missing Owen Ryan. Owen Costello would have been there for all their success, and Garrett Sparling as well, a young lad coming through the system. But under the radar, they've gone about their business. They've won 6 out of 6, and they beat Casey's in the semi-final, which is no mean feat. They'll definitely be happy where they are.
Oh God! Of course they will, Jack. You must have got a look at my script before you came on there, because, if you were told, whilst you would fancy Newcastle West and they are at the start of the season as possible finalists, as maybe I suppose in some cases probable finalists, but if you were then told that you work, the four that you mentioned would be out for the season, like, you would certainly revise your thoughts on it and you would revise your predictions. But you rightly said they've gone about their business quietly. And I suppose it is fair that the two teams that top their respective groups with unbeaten records, with 100% records, should contest the final. Now, they got the direct passage to the semi-finals, which in some cases can be a bit of a poison chalice, in that that their opponents invariably would have had played a quarter-final. But they surmounted that. And I saw both semi-finals, and Newcastle West had, they had the ideal semi-final, Jack, when you come out at the right side of it. It was a real tough, searching test from Monagea, and the outcome was on a knife edge, Jack. 2 minutes into injury time, Newcastle West were just winning by a point, and then they crafted up a wonderful goal, which was finished by Dermot Kelly. And it was only at that stage did they put the game to bed. So, like, they had a real test. Now, looking at the other semi-final, by contrast, it was one-sided, Jack, to a point. The scoreline would suggest so, but if you dig behind them, if you dig behind the scoreline and see that Father Casey's, for some inexplicable reason, mounted up a tally of 16 wides on the day. Now, Father Casey's, they literally, Jack, flew out of the traps in Fina that day. 3 points up, 3 points from play after 5 minutes, and it looked to be all going so well, but slowly but surely and patiently, Adair reined in on him, and eventually caught up with him, and then went ahead. And you got a sense in that particular game, Jack, that once Adair got their noses in front, they were not going to be overtaken. I thought it was a very consummate, efficient performance by Adair. And so many times in the past, in games like that, Hugh Burke has been the go-to man. Wasn't there on this occasion. Who'll forget the goal he got in the 2020 final in the early moments when Adair were facing a gale force wind? That was the type of inspirational player that they were missing. But slowly but surely, they did it the Adair way, and they did it. They did it through the experience they have garnered up through the years, up through the last 5 or 6 years, and particularly, Jack, the winning mentality that they've got. Like, you must remember that they were relegated in 2015.
15, yeah.
Won the intermediate in 2016. Won the senior in 2017, 2019, and 2020. Throwing two Premier under 21 championships to go with it. And one would be inclined to say this is a team that you'd be inclined to say that it is a team of old men and that they have been around forever. Not a bit of it, Jack. This is still a very, very young and formidable at their side.
Yeah, and it's good you highlight that. I suppose we played them in, was it round 3 after the break, and without Hugh and the 2-1s, and then, like, for Ballysteen, you would have targeted that game and said this is the game where it can beat Adair, and like Casey started well, got a goal, and we're ahead for probably 40 minutes or so, and as you said, slowly but surely they grind you down, and they just have this know how to win. And Hugh Burke, talking to him before the final, he mentioned it so many times, this know-how and this experience, and they're just so hard to beat, even when they're not playing at their best. And I don't think they've played at their best this year, which is fair because of all the injuries, but it's so difficult to beat that even if they're not at their best, they won't allow you to get your best, and they'll beat you at 60 or 70%. And they'll have no fear of Newcastle, because in 17, they would have been ranked outsiders, you know, coming up from intermediate ranks, and they caused a shock. And since then, themselves, Newcastle, have had this back and forth, and they'll carry that 2021 final with them because they never got going last year. What they do to other teams, the kind of Newcastle did to them last year. But you know, on that know-how, it's just so difficult to play against there.
Yeah, very, very difficult. I saw him a couple of times during the campaign, and I particularly saw him against Ballylanders, who were relegation threatened at the time. And you know, they dug out a result that very few clubs, they beat Ballylanders by a point on an evening when Ballylanders demonstrably were probably the better team. But it was this whole Adair thing. We'll hang in there, we won't concede. And they held on to win by a point, which was, you know, crucial for both sides. Crucial from an Adair perspective in that it ensured them a semi-final spot, and from a Ballylanders perspective in that it sent them nosediving into the relegation playoff. So yeah, they've got this winning mentality, but you know, starting out, it wasn't easy for the Dare this year, for the simple reason that, yeah, they were down to 4 players, and you had a new management team coming in after the long reign of Harry Gleeson, and you know there was a bit of time for the players to get accustomed to the methods of John Bruder and his management team, of, you know, Pat Donnelly and Michael Byrne, and you know, that in itself took time, but it bedded in very, very quickly. Of course, John Bruder is a hugely experienced manager, and you know, a peculiar type of manager, Jack, in that he has won counties and reached all Irelands in hurling and football. Hurling and Camogie. Won an All-Ireland Camogie with Milford and reached an All-Ireland hurling final with Charleville as manager. You know, so there was probably a bit of getting used to it, but you know, they rose above it, Jack, and they're here, and here on merit, you'd have to say.
They are, and I suppose we're 10 minutes into talking about them, but they are facing, I suppose, the most formidable team in Limerick football, and I would say the best team in Limerick over the last 7 or 8 years, not in terms of actually winning championships, but if there's one team you don't want to play, it is Newcastle West. The quality of players they have, even you mentioned Dermot Kelly coming on and scoring a goal, like, he didn't start from, you know, he's played much championship this year that I don't think other teams can afford to do that, but Newcastle can, and they have been guilty of being complacent on a given day that has proved really costly over the last 2 years. You know, like in 18, they would have been heavy favourites against Ballylanders. As I said the previous year before that, it was Adair in the final. I know they lost Adair in 2020, which is fair enough when they play each other. But this year, they seem to have arrested all that complacency. They're, you know, grinding out a win when they need to, and they're putting up big scores when they need to as well. I'm thinking back to when they beat Calvary, I think, heavily with Mike Mack, got a hat-trick. But in terms of squad depth, there is no team that can compete with Newcastle West.
No, and that would be the case. I would say I would go further than 6 or 7 years. I'd go as far as a decade, actually, Jack. And but the unfortunate thing from a Newcastle West perspective is that they haven't translated it into success. In, like, for instance, on Sunday they will be seeking to put back-to-back titles for the first time. Yeah. Very, very interesting statistic. They've played 6 games. They haven't conceded a goal yet, Jack, in the championship.
Yeah, I actually don't have that.
Which is a fair, you know, it's a fair record, and they have chalked up some very, very good, you know, impressive scores. But they have a propensity at times, as you touched on it there, that in some games they just come down a notch or a level or two. You know, when they'll be raging hot favourites invariably, you know, which is quite commonplace over the last couple of years. They don't ever seem to disappoint in those situations. because they start to come down to the level of what's in front of them. But there seems to be a new maturity about Newcastle West. The goal that they created in the semi-final, which clinched it, was a work of art, Jack. Here you were 62 minutes into the game, tired minds, tired bodies all over the place, and they crafted a goal of that caliber with pace and precision. And it gives you a sense of what they're all about. Now, they will not for 1 minute, Jack, be taken their challenge lightly. Yes, they beat them last year. But I suspect what will be uppermost in Newcastle West's minds is that they do not find themselves in the position that they found themselves in 2017, hanging on. And in the last gasp effort, they were undone by a Jack English goal. They won't want to put themselves in that position, and I don't expect that they will. But they are a very, very formidable team. If you go through the lines, Jack, the fact that Dermot Kelly, a player of Dermot Kelly's quality, has to be satisfied with a bench role and coming on and cameo role towards the finish. AJ O'Connor, hero of last year, I don't think he has played in the championship.
No.
So you can go down through it. What club in Limerick, Jack? What football club in Limerick over the years has had 2 All-Star nominees? Newcastle West have. In Ian Corbett and Cian Sheehan, who are both in the top of their game at the moment. And there is a platform. And I've been hugely impressed with some of the new players that have come on. And you were at the semi-final, Jack. I thought Emmett Richter, announced his arrival on the senior stage that particular day. Ruan O'Connor, Todd Donovan, very, very Sean Garrity, very, very exciting. Brian Nix is still a young player. There's some very, very exciting talent coming through. And then, of course, you have the experience of the 2 All-Stars that I said. You have Doc at full-back, Dam Doherty. You had James E. Kelly at centre-back.
Reinvigorated.
Absolutely, an absolute stalwart. And Brian O'Sullivan, who I thought had a very, very, very good game against Monagea.
Yeah, brilliant.
Particularly good game against Monagea. You've that type of quality spread all over the field, Jack, which puts Newcastle West in a very, very strong position.
Yeah.
I put it to you this way. If Newcastle West bring their A game to Kilmallock on Sunday, it'll be very, very hard to stop them.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. That they haven't been able to do it. That's the only thing. It's the only caveat that they haven't put back-to-backs together, and that's what they're hoping for. And they're obviously a very good side that can give it them if they're below par. But if Newcastle West are at their best, it's hard to see any team in Limerick, and probably Limerick, Waterford, Tip, and Clare in that regard, putting up to them. Obviously, Kerry and Cork club football seems to be a bit ahead of us at the time being. But Newcastle look like a potential force in Munster, not only in Limerick. But Adair have 3-2 over the last 5 years, and they'll be keen to double that and go to 4-2. But I'll get your prediction for that match in a while, Matt. Obviously, you have the Premier Junior football final also on Sunday in Tournafulla. The Battle of Belleville Gales sees Castlemahon and Fianna Kilmeedy against each other, and very rare you'd see, I suppose, lads that have played so close coming up the ranks against each other in a final. But that's what we have here. Castlemahon were intermediate only 4 years ago, and Fianna weren't playing football, am I right in saying, 2 or 3 years ago, and won the junior?
The history of Fianna is very, very interesting. I think it was in 2013 that they were county Junior B champions, and they played at Junior A for a year or two after, and then a number of players left to join Drum Broadford.
Yeah.
which left them in a position of being unable to field the team. When those players returned, they put in a team again, and when they returned, they returned with a very important addition that they brought one of the most decorated footballers from Broadford with him, Pat Donnelly, who is now domiciled in Fina or in Kilmeedy. But I saw their final last year. They won the Junior A final last year, and I saw the final against Camogie Rovers, and Pat Donnelly was such a huge influence, and very, very interesting for Donnell, this particular weekend. The game, the junior game is on at 11:45 because Pat would have to make a quick dash to Kilmallock because he's part of John Brudel's Adair backroom team. So it's going to be a busy day, but he has broad shoulders for it and he has the medals to show for it, Jack. But it's a very, very interesting final, and it's a phenomenal rise and a phenomenal story. The Fina Kilmeedy story. Now, interestingly, they have met, Jack, in the last round of the group phase.
Yeah.
And Castlemahon won it by 5 points. Now both of these teams lost their opening rounds. Fina Kilmeedy lost to Ballybrick and Bournemore, and Castlemahon lost to Cappamore. But interestingly, the way the thing turns around for Castlemahon is that in the semi-final, they had a very, very convincing win over Cappamore. Now, the question is, has Castlemahon improved that much, which I would be inclined to subscribe to that school of thought, or have Cappamore completely regressed? I doubt it. But it all makes for a very interesting final. And you were talking about the components of Belleville Gales and all that sort of thing. You have Mike Downey, who's manager of Fina Kilmeedy, and his brother Sean, who is on the Castlemahon squad.
Yeah,
so,
divided loyalties.
There'll be probably a certain amount of picture and no sound in the Downey household for this week, maybe. But two great servants of the game, absolutely fantastic, and they will be going full out for their respective sides on Sunday. But it's just a little interesting subplot. Now, the game is on at 11:45 in Tournafulla. And it will be a very, very, very interesting game. Like as you said, Castlemahon, they were playing in intermediate up to about 4 years ago when they were relegated over in Martinstown. One evening I was at the final when they were relegated by Bruff, on an evening which Chris Brown was irresistible, had a fantastic game for Bruff. But the previous year, actually, Jack, St. Sinnans needed 2 games to beat Castlemahon in the county semi-final.
Yeah.
So, like, the fall from grace in that short spell of time was dramatic. But they seem to have picked it up at the outset of this competition, Jack. They would probably have been mentioned in dispatches, nothing more, as potential finalists. I don't think Fina would have been mentioned at all.
Probably not, no.
So that it makes it a novel final in that sense.
Yeah, it's certainly a novel final, but with the layout of these championships, there's plenty of teams. There's 12 teams in there. The cream will rise to the crop, and it's an all West Limerick derby, which throws up its own unique flavour on the day. As you said, quarter 12 in Tournafulla on Sunday. It'll be an interesting day to start the day of football county finals. That's for sure. We start off the weekend with the junior hurling final. St. Kieran's versus Broadford on Saturday at 2:00 in Newcastle. Meeting the teams that are really hitting their stride. St. Kieran's were there last year and definitely came under the radar last year. I don't think there's any point in saying otherwise. And would have been favourites probably at the start of the year because of that, but have really lived up to that tag, having really good all year, playing a nice brand of hurling, hitting a lot of scores, haven't really been troubled in any game. I think it's fair to say have won all their games so far against a Drum side that started slowly, but they found their rhythm as well. Another all West derby it's intriguing, Matt.
It's intriguing, and it's an 8 game for both sides, and St. Kieran's have an absolutely perfect record in that they have 7 wins. Now Drum picked up 1 point from the first 2 games, which goes to show like that the improvement and the momentum that with Drum since has been phenomenal. And like they didn't do it the easy way, Jack. They didn't do it the easy way, in that they had a very, very tough semi-final against Patrick Swell. A very, very good Patrick Swell side that was fancied in many quarters as possible potential champions. But Drum dug in with them, and they eventually, after extra time, came out with a 1-point victory, which was fantastic. Now I saw the other semi-final involving St. Kieran's and Killedia, and Jack, he'd answered my question. You know, it answered my question 2 ways, insofar as I was wondering how they had won 6 games in a row, you know, and asking myself also, how did that team compare with last year? I got a very, very, very positive answer, Jack. A very, very good side. They've matured considerably from last year, and they are measurably better than they were last year. They've obviously learned the lessons of. You must remember now. I think they were beaten by 5 or 6 points in the final last year, but they were very, very, very unlucky. And I saw him in the final last year. I had seen him in the quarter final last year against Doon. I was less than impressed with him that day. I thought they would win the final. Wasn't very impressed with them, as I say, when they lost the final. And like you know, it spawned questions in my mind as to where they were at. But I think I got a very, very emphatic answer that they are in a very, very good place. And of course, you see, it has been a challenging, like an awful lot of clubs. We seem to forget. We talk about dual clubs, and that they, you know, if they're playing at the same level in both hurling and football, but we seem to forget that they were playing senior football, and they up to about 3 weeks before they won the semi-final, which, you know, once the pitch became clear in the semi-final, we'll say the pitch became clear when the footballers were knocked out. They were able to put full focus on it. But just on a little aside, Jack, in 1985, St. Kieran's won the Limerick Senior Football Championship and the Limerick Junior A Hurling Championship. They completed a very good double, and you know, for them, they were going in that direction until Mona Lean arrived on and ended the footballers' hope. So, yeah, I've been hugely impressed. I was very. I haven't seen Drum, but just studying their team sheet, you know, and there's a lot of experience in Drum. Like St. Kieran's have been playing junior A hurling since they were relegated in 2017, having been promoted in 2012, and the last time that St. Kieran's won the Limerick Championship in 2012, they went all the way to the Munster final, and they did it the hard way. They had to beat the Tipperary and Kerry champions, and they were very, very desperately, unluckily beaten by Kildare in the Munster final up in Mallow, and it was a day when, you know, I think it was Johnny McCarthy got his stick to a ball late in the game, and you know, but as far as Kildare was concerned, but for the grace of God, it went wide of the target, just missed the target. They were that near. No, they applied their trade for about 4 or 5 years after it at intermediate level, and then were relegated. Now, Drum were champions in 2015. They were relegated in 2019. So, so what I'm saying is that both sides contain a certain element of players, or a certain number of players that are used to playing at a higher level, and that will bring the experience element. So it will come down to the influence and the impact of the younger players on the respective sides.
Yeah, it will. And, obviously Kieran's have won 7 in a row, but Drum have won 5 in a row themselves. They lost their first game against Ballybrick and Bohermore, drew with Cricora, but have beaten everyone since, and you talked about that semi-final against Patrickswell. How often have we said, to come through a semi-final like that is huge for the team. So, I mean, it should be a close one. And again, I'll get your prediction in a while, or you want to jump in?
I agree with you, Jack. I agree with you that it was probably a better way to come through a semi-final than the way St. Kieran's came through. St. Kieran's came through with relative ease, Jack, but it was because of the level of performance that they put on. We cannot detract that. We cannot detract from that. Now we can't take it away from them. I left Paddy Carroll Park very, very impressed with St. Kieran's, I have to say.
Yeah, I have been impressed with them as well, what I've seen this year, and they do seem to have improved an awful lot. But Caroline showed last year if you can build up ahead of steam, you can go all the way, and maybe Kieran's started too early, but it is hard to look past last year's runners-up in the final. And moving on to staying on this weekend, we have 2 Munster finals, 2 Munster ladies football finals involving Monagea and Oola. And starting with Oola on Saturday evening, they're in action in the Munster Junior final. They're playing Nave Avon from Cork in the Junior Championship. They're obviously very impressive against the Fireys in their semi-final. A team that lost last year's Limerick final rebounded to come back this year, win it, and only 60 minutes away from a Munster Championship medal. And they scored a lot of goals. Both sides have scored a lot of goals looking at their kind of run to the final. So it should be an exciting game, at least.
It should be an exciting game, and I think you've mapped it out there very well about it's been the progression of Oola. It's the type of progression that's sustainable, like that you lose your final one year, you come back and you win it the following year, and then you make your first foray into provincial fair, and you're handed a kind of a poison chalice, a trip to Kerry. Any trip to Kerry, male or female, in football is daunting, but they brushed that aside and had a huge win over Fireys down on their own patch, 4-10 to 9 points. It augurs very well. Now the final is on Saturday evening at 5 o'clock in Mallow. Now they face a Nave Avon side who would be from around the Ballyvourney area of Cork. And they had a good win over O'Donovan Ross in the Cork final, and then in the semi-final, both Oola and Nave Avon had received buys to the respective semi-finals. So in their semi-final, they had a win over Cumra Rangers from Waterford. And they won that game quite handsomely. Now they are seeking a second title in this competition. Nave Avon were previous winners of the Munster Junior Championship way back in 1998, which is what they'll be celebrating the 25th anniversary of it last year. So I suppose it's fair to assume that there are no survivors from that team on the present team. But it's absolutely fantastic for Oola, fantastic for Limerick ladies football, that they have put themselves in this position. And they are a very, very competent side. Richard Bowles and his management team have done an excellent job in preparing Oola. I expect that they will give a very, very good account of themselves, and wouldn't be entirely shocked, Jack, if were they to bring it off. Now, they'll only become the second Limerick club to do so. Like Maru Boher did it in 2014 and went on to win the All-Ireland. And if memory serves me right now, and I might be subject to correction, that Maru Boher in that year had to travel to Holland for the quarter-final. They certainly had to travel to someplace exotic anyway. It wasn't Carrick and Lish nor Doon, it was
I can't confirm or deny that anyway.
But yeah, look, they're trying to emulate what their fellow East Limerick club did in 7 or 8 years ago, and I think they're in a good position, possibly to take another step, Jack.
Yeah, and winning the county would have been obviously the number one goal after losing the final last year. The shackles are off now for the side, and they do have great firepower going forward, and it's there to be won from now. They've got this far. We do wish them the very best of luck this Saturday.
Get the ball to Amy Ryan, as we see. She'll do the rest.
Yeah, exactly. She played her part in the final anyway, 2 goals. So more the same, hopefully, for Oola in the final this Saturday evening in Mallow at 5 o'clock. It won't be the only venture to Mallow for Limerick side this weekend. Monagea have their Munster final on Sunday morning at 11 in Mallow as well. They play Mullinahone of Tipperary, and I suppose while for Oola, the shackles are off. For Monagea, it's kind of more of a case of unfinished business. They played Castle Island Desmonds in the final last year. Looked to have it won, led from probably minute 1 to 50, and then the Kerry side got a goal, and Monagea got within 1, but just couldn't. 1-5 to 7, they lost. And it's probably played on their minds a lot, Matt. They were really good in the Limerick Championships here, won all their games. Played by Landers in a titanic tussle on Wednesday, and then followed up with St. Ailbe's the following Sunday. So they beat Dr. Crokes of Kerry in the quarterfinal, and Fergus Rovers then of Clare in the semi. So a nice pedigree teams they played along the way, but they will be desperate to win this after last year.
Yeah, and again, and we spoke about the progression of Oola there a while ago. There are parallels with the progression of Monaleen, county senior champions last year. Put it back to back this year. But put it back to back, Jack, after a very, very testing Limerick championship, particularly in the knockout stages. And I saw him a couple of times. I saw him in the semi-final and final. Ballylanders really pushed them to the limit in the semi-final. It took extra time before Monagea made the final. For a long period, particularly in the first half, and you were there, Jack, in the county final, it looked as if it was going to be LB's day. But the experience that Monagea have picked up over the years, it definitely came to their rescue on that occasion, and they dug out a great victory. One thing that struck me, Jack, and maybe I have said it to you in the past, talking to the like of Martin O'Sullivan and those that are involved, and some of the players that were involved with Monagea county final day. The one thing that that struck me was you had the euphoria of winning. You had the euphoria of winning back to backs, but the focus had immediately switched to Dr. Crokes. Absolutely instant. And that is where the unfinished business has come in. Like they went to Kerry, had a great win over Dr. Crokes, and then backed it up. Like anytime you go to Clare, it's tough. And they dug it out very, very convincingly. So they're going to Mallow on Sunday at 11 o'clock, Jack. In my opinion, in a very, very good place, and quite capable of taking that extra step. Now, Mullinahone, of course, would be the home club of hurling heroes, the Kellys, notably Owen Kelly and those, and Paul Cotton, but they contested. They won the Munster Junior Championship last year, Jack, and they contested the All Ireland final unsuccessfully. So, in their county final, they beat Bohalahan Douala, and I think beat them by something like 7 or 8 points, and then moved on to the semi-final where they beat Waterford's Aaron's Own. So, like, they too are coming in with a bit of pedigree. And, Monagea will underestimate the challenge of Mullinahone at their peril. But I'm sure that the management team back in Monagea will have their side primed. the boys that are involved with him have been around long enough. They've been around the block long enough, and they will be ready. They will be ready for Sunday. Now, interesting, the game is on at 11 o'clock, Jack. It's on at 11 o'clock because Martin O'Sullivan, the Monagea manager, as you know, is a selector with Newcastle West. And one of his key management team, Mike Quilligan, is the Newcastle West goalkeeper.
Yeah.
So,
success,
very
success.
interesting. And actually, the day of the county final, you will recall that himself, Mike Quilligan and Martin O'Sullivan remained, but Mike Quilligan and James E. Kelly had to make a mad dash to Drumculloher for the final group game against Father Casey's. So a lot of interlinking there, but you could say come Sunday evening, there's a strong possibility that maybe Martin and Mike Quilligan would have an awful lot to celebrate.
Yeah, they'd be definitely favourites probably in both of them as well, And for Monagea, they have huge experience from last year. Probably won't get, not to say they did last year, but they won't be overwhelmed by the experience playing the Munster final. It's been 12 months ago. Pretty much the same team. There's a couple of new younger faces, but pretty much the same team, getting ready for it. And we wish them all the best of luck, and we wish Oola.
Katrina Davis has been playing for a good while, and she's absolutely in the form of her life. She is playing outstanding, and Debbie Murphy and Karen O'Leary, they are supplying the ammunition for her. They have been magnificent. But Monagea as a team, Jack, have been simply magnificent over the last 2 years. And I just hope that it's their destiny to be crowned Munster champions on Sunday morning.
Yeah, and we spoke about a great deal the last 2 years of teams losing a final and coming back and winning it the following year. Oola did it in the Intermediate Championship. We've seen, KP do it, Bungrit do it, Newcastle West Hurlers do it, Glenroe do it, So hopefully the omens are well there for Monagea. They're on Sunday morning at 11 in Mallow. Oola are Saturday evening at 5 in Mallow. The best of luck to both sides to hopefully bring back a coveted Munster Championship back to Limerick. Moving on from ladies football into Camogie, Matt, and I suppose we saw a statement released last week, and I don't know, will we go into the ins and outs of it, but we have our final four in the Senior Camogie Championship. It's been a lengthy wait, and from the statement there's been plenty of appeals, to do with an unregistered player or whatever. We won't get into the nitty gritty of it, but we have 4 teams remaining. The champions Newcastle aren't one of those, whether rightly or wrongly. The championship will go on without them. We've Killeedy versus Bruff and Granite Ballingarry versus Ahan. Before we get into the game, do you want to say anything about what has happened? Or I suppose there's probably more going to come out of this situation. It's just messy, I think.
No, Jack, other than that there are no winners. It's a sad situation. At the end of the day, the county champions are out of the championship and out of the B championship. And also a spin-off from this is that Limerick are out of the Munster Clubs Championship because they will be unable to meet the deadline. And it's a sad saga, and it's not just a sad saga for Newcastle West. It's a sad saga for all the clubs that have been involved, because some of the clubs have qualified for the semi-finals with almost 2 months now. And there are other clubs that didn't know their fate pending on the outcome of the various appeals and what have you. But as they say in the Vatican, at last we have white smoke. We have semi-finals, and the first semi-final will go on Saturday at 2:30 in Mackey Park in Ahan, when Ahan will take on Granite Ballingarry. And interestingly, Jack, these two sides, this is a meeting of beaten semi-finalists of last year. Ahan were beaten when they travelled to Killeedy, and Granite Ballingarry were beaten when they travelled to Newcastle West in both games were played in absolutely, I cannot stress it, Jack, how atrocious the conditions were on that particular day. So Forahan and Granite Ballingarry, it's a question of going one better than last year. And I suppose the biggest question of all is, how will they have coped with the hiatus in the competition? That will be the biggest question. You know, how will they maintain the momentum from the group stages to the knockout stages? And the same applies to all the teams that are involved this week. But look, at least we've county semi-finals. We're going to have a county championship. Unfortunately, our champions will not be able to participate in Munster. But it is what it is now, and it's a sad saga. It should be parked, lessons learned, and move on.
Yeah, it's important to move on. And there's 4 teams.
The other semi-final features a team which, you know, if you go back when we were previewing the Camogie Championship, we did say watch for Bruff. And they are there now. And they have home advantage against Killeedy. Now, Killeedy were in the happy position that they knew for the last 2 months that they were in the semi-final. I'm not so sure that it was a happy position when all the uncertainty surrounded it and who you might be playing and where you might be playing and all that sort of thing. But certainly not the ideal preparation for the runners-up last year. But they travelled to Bruff, and it's going to be a very, very tricky game for Killeedy. Bruff are formidable. You'll recall they went to Newcastle West in the first round and were only beaten in the closing stages there, and subsequently drew with Piarsaigh, and before having a very good win over a refixed game with Granite Ballingarry. So, the addition of Mairead Ryan, who's a very, very experienced county player who transferred. Mairead, of course, is a native of Knockcaney, and it fitted in very well that she should transfer her allegiance from Clooney, Quinn and Clare to Bruff, which was a huge boost. And, of course, it was a double boost when Mary O'Callaghan, a former Limerick player, returned from abroad. And that was a huge boost for him. So, 2 very, very interesting semi-finals. I'm not going to don't ask me who's going to win, Jack. Because I'll tell you I don't know.
Yeah, it could come down to which team has, served the break the best, because it wasn't as if they were told in 2 months you weren't playing. It was very uncertain and really hard to motivate a team. So it could be a case of who was just training the better, or, conditions will play their part. It's quite windy at the moment. Last year's semi-finals, I won't say were ruined by the weather, because it was the same for both teams, but you mentioned how difficult it was on that day. So, look, the main thing is we're getting our semi-finals. We will have a champion at the end of it. We have 4 good teams remaining. They make for 2 interesting semi-finals.
No, the B championship now is down to 3 clubs, and the Cricora, Piarsaigh and Cappamore, and the B semi-final is on Sunday at 12 noon in Cricora, when Cricora will host Piarsaigh, and I'm sure that the B final will involve the winners and Cappamore. Now, another fallout from the unfortunate situation is that there's going to be no relegation from the Senior Camogie Championship this year. So what we will be looking at next year is we'll be looking at 9 senior clubs, because Adair will be up senior. And of course, Adair are involved this weekend, Jack. They go into the Munster Championship this weekend. They travel to Clare to play Tulla in the Munster semi-final. And we'd like to wish them the best of luck as well, because certainly they too are in a good place after winning the Limerick Championship there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, they've definitely been a team rising through the ranks, and obviously back-to-back championships. They're a team that we had picked out, early in the year, and they lived up to expectation. So the best luck to there. best of luck to all the teams in action this weekend. As I said, it's just good that we're going to have a conclusion to this championship. It didn't come, and it won't come in the manner that we wanted to finish, but it will be finished, and we'll have a winner on the field, which is the main thing, Matt. Before we finish up, we'll look back on last week's finals. I know we've gone 70 minutes, so we won't dwell on them for too long. And we'll finish with the senior final because it's obviously the showpiece event. But we had 3 finals on Saturday. Ballingarry made successive promotions. They beat Munster St. Paul's in the Junior A Championship. They'll be playing Premier Junior football next year. I know neither of us were there because they clashed. You were in Kilmallock for the Premier Intermediate.
Yeah, just before we go away from the Ballingarry, among the Ballingarry team and the scorers was Limerick's 2013 Munster Senior Hurling winning captain Donald O'Grady, who is a current Limerick selector. Not only did he feature on the team, but he featured on the scoreboard as well with 2 very, very useful points.
Yeah, it's a handy player to have, and I suppose we're seeing a lot of that, Matt. A lot of, we'll say, obviously, predominantly footballers playing hurling and vice versa. Adair will have Willie Griffin, in this Saturday's senior final, and we all know how good Willie has been for their hurlers, and I don't think I ever saw him play football before this year. So it's interesting to see players like that, and Donald O'Grady is not a bad player to call upon, and he's served the club so well, not only playing with him, but as captain of Limerick. And there was great pride in Ballingarry. So back-to-back wins for them. I'm not really surprised. We played them in junior a couple of times. They're an extremely good team. So they're back. They're into the Premier Junior grade. As I said, you were in Kilmallock for Bruff and Monaleen. We had both tipped Bruff, but Monaleen got the win by 6 points. Goals proving crucial on the day, Matt.
Yeah, the goals were crucial, Jack, but I suppose that would be a simplistic analysis of the outcome. I think very few people would argue that the better team on the day won. Monaleen. The occasion was slightly marred, Jack, by, again, and I hate coming back to this, but it's a fact of life, the atrocious conditions that prevailed before the game. Now, my hat went out to both Bruff and Monaleen, who were trying to do their warm-up in appalling conditions. And the first 10 minutes of the game were played in appalling conditions. But thankfully, the elements for the remainder of the game were much kinder. And I would have to say that full credit to both sides, the way they adapted to the conditions. And it was a good game of hurling, Jack. It was a good final. And we've said a number of times that the Premier Intermediate Championship never fails to deliver. It didn't fail to deliver last Saturday either, despite those atrocious conditions. And Monaleen were full value. What I found interesting, Jack, about it was, as you know, these two sides met in the Premier Under-19 final way back in August.
Yeah.
And both sides fielded 4 of those players, and there was 4 from each side that featured in that Under-19 final, starting in the intermediate final. And I think I made mention of this last week in the context of the preview, that it augurs very well for both sides. Now, at half time, Jack, you couldn't see that either side would win by 6 points. Now, Monaleen started off brilliant. They got a goal through Marco de Wire. And the Bruff response came in the shape of 6 unanswered points. And they looked to be ticking a lot of the boxes at that stage. But by half time, the sides were level. And going in at half time, a couple of points before half time, including an inspirational point by Larkin Lyons, who was outstanding throughout the game at centre back. He hit an inspirational equaliser just on the stroke of half time. And they went in level. But when he came back out, you were just wondering which side was going to pick it up, and the answer was emphatically Monaleen. With full credit to Bruff, they battled, and they battled. And I thought Sean Finn was outstanding. He had definitely put the disappointment of the All-Stars very firmly behind him. Paul Brown, who featured in an intermediate final for the first time in 2007, had lost none of his appetite for it. He was there, put in a big shift in the bad conditions, goading his players, trying to inspire them. But one thing that came through to me at the end of it all, Jack, in summary, was that I think Monaleen, newly promoted Monaleen, are in a better place than the Monaleen that was relegated last year. I honestly think that they are better prepared and more ready for the rigours of senior hurling in 2023.
Yeah, I was in the Skeeton, but I was watching the game on the stream, and they did just look the more complete team. I think it's fair to say that, and they do look, as you said, better positioned. They just seem to have more structure to their game. Players know what they're doing. It obviously helps when you have a lot of young lads coming through, giving a bit of energy to the team. And you mentioned, likes of Larkin Lyons and, more elder lads like Ed Doyle and Marco Dwyer. They're not old by any means, but, they're probably mid-20s now and real leaders of the team. And Andrew Latouche, Cosgrave came on then as well, so.
Yeah, which was fantastic to see it because he's been dogged by injury all season. Very, very, very unlucky not to have got his name on the score sheet with a point. Very, very unlucky that it wasn't a goal. He was a small bit disappointed after, but he got his name. He forced a fantastic save from Eric Penn, a young man that I think that we should be on the lookout for. And he stands at about 6'3" or 6'4". Is with Monaleen fullback Brian Kenny. Was a member of that under-19 team. I was really impressed with the type of maturity that he showed any time that the pressure came on the full-back line. So, you're Ronan Lyons, Joseph Fitzgerald, Lachlan McHale. They were all members of the under-19 team, and they will comfortably and seamlessly make the transition to senior hurling next year. And that is part of my reason for saying that I think that they are in a better position because, they have seamlessly made the transition from underage hurling to adult hurling. So I cannot see any reason as to why they won't continue the progression into 2023.
Yeah, and they've that winning habit behind them as well now, which will bode well for next year. We saw the likes of KP and Mungret, that when you bring that win and run with you, it's easier to stay up there. Monaleen obviously are a dual senior club. Again, after 1 year away from that, the Piarsaigh are the same. After they claimed intermediate football championship honours, they beat Drum 2-8 to 2-6. And I think, to be fair, it wasn't a 2-point win. The Piarsaigh were a much better side. Again, structured, knew their game plan, just let in very sloppy first goal, gifted the goal to Drum. Second goal was soft again. 2 mistakes for their goals, whereas their second goal in particular was very well worked. Gordon Brown was brilliant throughout. He was Martin Killian Fahy and definitely won that battle. Gave a lovely ball to Dylan Cronin, and if you give Dylan Cronin enough ball, he'll score. I'd say he finished with probably 1-5 of their total. Now a couple of those are frees, but Dylan is a brilliant forward. Just a more rounded team, Arna Piarsaigh, and they were kind of two sides that were lower level senior for a good few years. They, like Monaleen now, will benefit from having won a couple of games. They obviously won all their games this year. They only played 5, but they won them all, and quick rebound into the senior ranks. They'll be very familiar with those teams, and there'll be no fear of the Piarsaigh. Again, as I said, a dual senior team. You obviously weren't there, but you've probably heard a share of reports. But they weren't there for a win.
I fancied them at the very outset, if you will recall, but I changed my mind during the course of the game of the campaign, and the sole reason for changing my mind, and I made it very, very clear in a podcast about a couple of weeks ago. I thought the structure of their group was absolutely shameful. That they only got 3 games, and I honestly believe that going forward into the knockout stages, that it would be to their detriment. But they rose above it completely, and very, very much so in the semi-final, because they got 2 walk-ups. Like they ended up with 9 points from the group stage. Kokora Manister through with him, and but nearly half of their points come from walkovers. Not an ideal situation, Jack. But I think Wayne Cronin was at the press evening before the county final was at pains to stress that they may not have been playing championship games, but they were playing good challenge games, and it bore fruit. And Drum will be very disappointed, I'm sure, because their campaign and their challenge had gathered momentum as the year went on, and they looked to be in a good place going into the final. But full credit to the Piarsaigh. It was a fantastic weekend for the Piarsaigh. Win the intermediate football championship on Saturday and the senior hurling championship on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll go on to that scene and we'll round out. We'll have our predictions afterwards. But the senior final, we had looked so much forward to clash of two heavyweights, Limerick hurling, the defending champions against the Piarsaigh side that had won 6 championships in 11 years. But I think it's fair to say the game itself didn't live up to the hype in the fact that the Piarsaigh were just so dominant. Started brilliantly. Graham Mulcahy and Peter Casey traded scores. Then you'd score some like Kevin Downs, and Robbie Hanley was very good in that first half. And it was that first goal from Adrian Breen kind of somewhat killed a bit of Kilmallock's momentum. And the second goal then before half time killed the contest, I think it's fair to say. In the grand scheme of things, there was hopes that Kilmallock would muster a comeback, but this Piarsaigh team is so polished. If they get ahead of you, they'll stay ahead of you. I think it's fair to say, and particularly Adrian Breen 2-3 got man of the match. Peter Casey got 7 from play. There was just some brilliant performances throughout the field. The defence, I thought Mike Foley was brilliant at wing back. Came out with so much ball. Will Donoghue was himself. Dave Dempsey eventually got his goal. He had to work very hard for it in the end. He had a couple of chances missed, but they were out Jerome Boylan. Didn't seem to miss it at all. Sean Long came in, did a fine job. Mike Casey, curtailed Shane O'Brien very well. Just a real.
McAvoy had a very good game, I thought.
You could go through the whole team, but real classy, dominant performance from the Piarsaigh. Never let Kilmallock into their stride, and for the Piarsaigh, it's going to be quickly turn their attention to Munster. But I suppose, what was your initial thoughts after the game?
Well, my initial thoughts after the game, Jack, was that I had seen. I was disappointed with the final. In that it was one-sided because there had been such a build-up to it, but the Piarsaigh have put on some great performance over the years, Jack, and Sunday's performance ranks up there with him, if not above him. It was as near as you'll come, Jack, to a complete performance by the Piarsaigh.
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic. And I think the defining period in the game was, and you flagged it about Adrian Breen's goal right at the death of the first half. And you would expect that Kilmallock would come out, hit the ground running, with all guns blazing after the break, in a bid to redeem to redeem the game, but not no. The Piarsaigh carried on, and the Kilmallock didn't score for 11 minutes after half time, and then that score came from a Micheál Houlihan free, and in the meantime, the Piarsaigh had added on 3 points, so now the 7-point mountain had become a 10-point Everest, because with 20 minutes remaining, 7 points with 30 minutes remaining, some bit of a chance. 10 points with 20 minutes remaining, considerably less of a chance. Look, it was the complete performance by the Piarsaigh, and it's a performance, Jack, that and I don't want to be jumping the gun, that has them well primed and well ready for the forthcoming Munster Championship, which may very well be, and we'll know on Sunday, could be a Munster semi-final showdown at the Gaelic grounds with Munster and All-Ireland champions Ballygunner.
Yeah,
and of course, Na Piarsaigh would have a score to settle with the champion from a Munster final of a couple of years ago. But look, scores or no scores to settle them, this was a fantastic performance by Na Piarsaigh. Now, I was of the opinion, and still of the opinion, that possibly Kilmallock were a better team than last year.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, I thought Shane O'Brien was very isolated on Mike Casey and the spare man, whether that was Emmett McAvoy or Sean Long, but it did seem to be 3-on-2 inside there, or 2-on-1 a lot. Kilmallock insisted with it for a share of time, it just wasn't working, whereas Na Piarsaigh were a lot more clever. But I think we're guilty, myself especially, of you take Na Piarsaigh for granted, and when they're not flying off the handles like they're not hammering teams, you think, you know, that the well has run dry, or they're not the same team, but they're every bit as good as the team of 11, 13, 15, 17, 18, you know, the 20 that have won county titles. They're so formidable, you know, and there's a huge turnover of players. Obviously, the likes of, you know, Will, Peter, Dave Dempsey, Mike Casey, you know, Cathal King have remained throughout, and a few more, Kevin Downs. But there's a lot of new fellas in that team, you know, that have come through and settled in seamlessly, and the conveyor belt is continuing to produce. But, you know, when you have the likes of the forward line they have, you know, you only need one or two to hit form, and that's exactly what Peter Casey and Adrian Breen did. From a scoring point of view, Kevin Downs nailed his frees, but what we were just discussing, who was your man of the match, Matt? If you were to pick between probably Adrian Breen or Peter Casey, Breen got it.
Yeah, I thought the two of them were magnificent, Jack. I'd sit in the fence on it if you could have a joint player of the match, but the execution, Jack, the execution and the creation and the execution of some of their scores was just off the wall. Like it was just simply fantastic. Like it's fantastic to see Peter Casey back to the bottom that we know that Peter Casey can produce, back to the form that he had shown in the All Ireland final of 2021 before he suffered that desperate injury. You know, it's just fantastic. He has recaptured the Jack, and not only is it good for Na Piarsaigh, but it's very, very good for Limerick. And like Adrian Breen, like over the years, Jack, there have been few better club hurlers, you know, and like his appearances with Limerick have been limited. I would go to suggest in any other county, Adrian Breen would be a starter. But I suppose the fact that he's not is probably testimony to the strength of the Limerick team, of the present Limerick squad. I thought he was excellent, but you know, how often does he have to do this? You know, he's totally consistent when it comes to this kind of stuff. You know, of turning it on. You know,
fantastic. Look,
fantastic.
You could really deep dive into the Piarsaigh performance and pick that while they're champions, but you know, they were just the better team, far superior on the day. Like, you know, if they met again, it could be a different story. I think Kilmallock would definitely do things differently, but Na Piarsaigh are champions again. They keep up that streak of not going more than 2 years without a championship since 11, which is really incredible. And Kieran Birmingham now was the captain in 11. He's obviously won his second title as manager now, but you know, they did speak about that a lot, that they are, you know, giving back to the club, and we've seen the likes of the Caseys and Kevin Downs and Shane Dowling and these players train underage, which is, you know, frightening for other teams as well, that they're getting such good coaching from such a young age. But Na Piarsaigh are deservedly 2022 Limerick Senior Hurling champions. Monagea Premier Intermediate champions. Na Piarsaigh again Intermediate football champions, and we had Granite Ballingarry Junior A football champions. Looks like you want to jump in with something there.
Yeah, I was just saying before we go from the Na Piarsaigh game, William O'Donoghue's acceptance speech, Jack, outstanding, absolutely, well worth noting. Absolutely outstanding. But typical the man, he does it on the field and he does it off the field, and you know, I thought that his remarks were so well thought out, so well presented, and so appropriate. An excellent post-match acceptance speech.
Yeah, brilliant speaker and a good insight into the kind of character he is. And, a born winner is Will O'Donoghue. He's won it all, and he'll be looking to captain his side on a Munster Championship run. Obviously, they'll play the winners of Kilroy and McDonough's and Ballygunner in the Munster semi-final in a couple of weeks' time. And all the teams we mentioned so far will have Munster Championship, bar Ballingarry, because it'll be Castlemahon or Fina that represent Limerick in the Munster Junior Football Championship. It looks like Matt could be gone from us, and I hope he's not, because with predictions, yeah, it's definitely where I need him to come in, but he seems to be gone there. I'll call it, and I'll get Matt on tomorrow. We'll do the predictions tomorrow. But yeah, a huge bumper episode there, 3 Talk in 90 minutes. It ran a bit long today. We obviously had the lads on from the Illustrated Tales of the Terrace, the new Limerick GAA book. To get that, go to message limerickbook@gmail.com to get yours. We obviously have 3 county finals this weekend: Adair Newcastle Senior Football, Fiona Castleman Premier Junior Football, and Kieran's from Broadford in the Junior A hurling. So much going on. We have Camogie semi-finals. We have 2 Munster ladies football finals. We've Matt back on. We lost you there for a second, Matt. I was just ending the podcast, but so before we will go, we will do our predictions. I don't think it was me. I think it was you. Mine was working fine, but before we go, very quickly, as we always round out predictions, we'll look at last week's. Wasn't great for you. 1 out of 4, and I got 3 out of. 1 out of 4. I got 3 out of 4. I got the Piarsaigh 2-point winners in football. Bang on. So would you believe we're both on 62 points after 15 weeks, which is fair going now to be level. But yeah, the Piarsaigh double did me well. This week we'll just look at sorry.
Fools seldom differ.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. 3 men's finals this week. Look forward to. We'll start with Fina Kilmeedy versus Castleman.
Castleman by 3, Jack.
Castleman to win the Belleville Gales derby. I'm going for Fina by 2, just to continue in their winning streak. Junior A hurling, Drum and Kieran's.
Kieran's by 2.
Kieran's by 2. Close margin. I have Kieran's by 5. I just think they're really, really solid team. Really, really good. And Adair Newcastle West in the Limerick Senior Football Championship Final.
Newcastle West by 3.
NCW by 3. I have Newcastle by 5. I just think they're the best team in the county, and Adair without a good number of players, which is quite difficult. But again, I think we also stress that we don't kick a ball, we don't poke a ball, we just go for entertainment purposes only. So yeah, the best luck to all the teams in the county finals this weekend. The teams, go on.
Would you believe I was told in Bruff, I was told in Kilmallock, and I was told in the Gaelic grounds, oh, you got it wrong, you know.
Well, would you believe in Askeaton, I was talking to a player and they said, Matt got it wrong and you backed us. So, I mean, they're watching. But we're only doing it for a bit of fun. I don't want to see any team win or lose, particularly unless Ballysteen are playing or Askeaton. I want those teams to win regardless of who they're playing. But outside of that, I don't care.
I had a serious difficulty with the Piarsaigh footballers for the reason that I said I fancied them from the start of the year to make a quick return. First of all, I didn't think that they should have been relegated, you know. And I suppose now in hindsight, it might be the best thing that happened to them in that they've regained momentum and what have you. But again, Jack, like what happened in that group, Jack? And you'll think I'm obsessed with it.
No,
and you know my views on walkovers, but it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen.
No, it shouldn't happen. And to be fair to the Piarsaigh, the deck was stacked against them with that regard, but they got the job done. They got promoted and they're back in the senior ranks, back at Jewel Club. Monagea are back to being a Jewel Club, in fairness to them as well. But the best luck to the 6 teams in Limerick County Finals this weekend. Monagea and Oola in Munster finals. Obviously, the sides in Camogie semi-finals as well. It's a really bumper weekend. We didn't even dwell that much on the All-Stars. We were so busy. But we have 95 minutes on the clock. A huge thank you to you, Matt. Thank you to Niall and Liam as well at the start of the show. I hope you enjoy your county finals, Matt, whichever ones you go to, and have a good weekend. We'll be in touch soon.
I'm going to the Junior A hurling final, and I'm going to the senior football final. I'm looking forward to them immensely, and to the senior Camogie semi-final on Sunday.
Well, I'll be watching the senior football final from Disney World or Disneyland in Paris, so I'll be away for the weekend, but I'll get to see that one. But I'll be updated. I'm sure you'll keep me updated on Twitter for the other results, and I'm sure I'll be asked to put away my phone in Paris, but I'll have to keep an eye on. But again, a huge thing.
How do you do, Jack? Because I can scarcely afford to go to Kilmallock.
Well, see, I thought all the county championships would be over last weekend, and then this weekend would be a bye week before we were in Munster, which things were pushed back. But it's grand. I'll be there. I'll be watching the football. I don't know, will your dulcet tones be on commentary? I'm not sure if that's decided yet. But for now, anyway, a huge thank you to you, Matt. A huge thank you to everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back next week.
The impression again we get out with what you put into it's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Johnny Buckley. To do that to Tommaso Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word court today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left?